Good evening, everyone. It's good that you could come along tonight. I hope by tomorrow night you might bring someone else with you, because what I'm going to talk to you about this week, we're going to cover quite a lot of what we find to be very important subjects in relation to health. We've got a big problem in the world today, is that we're seeing health degenerate very, very quickly. And the first part tonight, we're going to talk a lot about the bad news, about what really is happening in the world in health. And then the second half, we'll look at what we can do about it. Other nights, we're going to talk about hormones. We're going to talk about dentistry and the effect that some of the dental work that happens today can have upon our health. We're going to talk about the mind, the health of the mind, and a number of other different subjects. So I hope you can come along every night. Now, before I really get started tonight, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my own background. I was born and raised in Sydney, and I haven't always been involved in health. I was actually on the other side of the fence for quite a few years because when I was a little boy, I was probably 2 years old, I was being fed a lot of sugar, a lot of jelly and ice cream and all the things that little boys get. And I suppose they get it even worse these days. But I developed tonsillitis, and the doctor said that he would take my tonsils out when I was 2 years old. While he was in there taking them out, he decided that it might be a good idea to take out the adenoids too. Now, there was nothing wrong with the adenoids, but it was normal procedure that if they took out tonsils, they'd take the adenoids out too. Now, there's a study come out from Russia recently showing that the adenoids are not just involved with the lymphatic system, but they are involved with the pituitary system during the first 5 years. And as a result, they have a lot to do with growth. And if children have their adenoids taken out before they're 5, they usually never develop full growth. And so they're usually fairly skinny. And because my adenoids were taken out when I was 2, it's probably one of the reasons why I've been fairly thin all my life. But because I was the runt in the litter of 4 children, you know, Mum tried to fatten me up all the time by giving me more sugar and more fat and you name it. I just couldn't tell you all the things I used to eat. I had tremendous grandparents too. You know, like I used to get all the sweets that I could ever want. And they lived fairly close, so I was around there all the time. I used to have these ice cream sodas all the time with Grandma's lemonade with ice cream in it. And my grandfather used to just love giving me violet crumble bars. So, yeah, so the trouble was that none of this stuff put on weight. So Mum just kept feeding me. She said to me, you've just got to have lots of different meals. Like not just breakfast, you need morning tea, you need pre-lunch, you need lunch, afternoon tea, another one when you come home. I'd have a big chop when I got home, and then I'd have another big dinner later on, and then I'd have 6 or 7 Weet-Bix before bed. But it didn't work. I just didn't get fat. And I suppose some of the side effects of that was that my teeth developed holes. So I had about 13 or 14 fillings in my teeth by the time I was 16 years of age. And my health was always on the downer. I was always struggling, getting infections, getting the flu, and not understanding that these were simply the body's effort to try and eliminate all the junk that I was putting in there. But the trouble was, when I got the flu, I'd get taken to the doctor, and the doctor would give me antibiotics which would stop the body's natural process of elimination. So it was no surprise I got to about 17 or 18, I think I was, and one day I just collapsed, and I ended up in bed for 6 weeks with a glandular condition that the doctors said they just didn't know what it was. There was no virus in the blood. It was just, I had swollen glands. It was just the body had had enough of all this junk food. So I struggled through a career in accountancy, and in my early 20s, I ended up leaving a big firm of accountants in Sydney, and I joined a big finance corporation where I worked for about 10 years. And during the end of that 10-year period, I was starting to really think I was wearing out. I was around in my early 30s. I didn't think I was going to live a lot longer because I was yellow and I was tired all the time, and I had a very responsible job, and I just was struggling to perform. And that's when I started looking into health. I thought, I've got to do something or I'm going to die. If I don't make some changes and make them quickly, I'm just not going to make 40. So I got some books and I started reading. One of the books I got was Nathan Pritikin's book. And Nathan Pritikin was promoting a diet that was free from all fat. Now that was a problem too. I followed that up with Ross Horn's book, The New Health Revolution, and he said, no, you've got to have your fats, but he was still promoting a very meagre diet of raw food. He said have avocados and olives, but everything needed to be raw. And so I started following these fad diets trying to get well, and a lot of them actually made me a lot worse. But in time I started getting into a lot more exercise, and I started getting really interested in health to the point where I wanted to make a career out of it. I found that in the company I was working for, I had about 45 staff. I had 8 branches I was in charge of in this particular company. And when any of them got sick, they used to call me up at that point and they'd say, yeah, you've been studying it all, what do you think I should do? So I was writing them out programs on how to change their lifestyle. And then they were bringing their clients to me. And so then I really knew I had to change my career because I was enjoying this helping people get healthy more than I was enjoying the finance. So in 1984, I left that company. I decided that I needed a lot of money if I was going to move to the country and try and get into this sort of work. So I started up my own practice, doing accounting and management, managing finances for people. And I did that for about 2.5 years, and I made enough money to get out of the city. We were living in Sydney, so we sold up and we moved to North New South Wales, where I just studied natural medicine for 3.5 years. And during that time, I started running health seminars, and we opened up a clinic and we started taking people into our home. Now, around that time, it was about 1986, a naturopath from America, an old man, he was getting close to 80. He came over to Australia and he ran a number of courses for naturopaths who were interested in going a bit further. And his courses were based on his own studies. Over his life, he'd run a number of clinics where he used to take people into his clinic for 10 days. And during that 10 days, he would be like a motor mechanic. You know, if your car's got a problem, you put it into the workshop for 10 days or for a few days, and the professionals have a good look at it and they work out what's wrong with it and they work out how to fix it. And that's what he was doing with people. And he had a very good record for getting people well. And so I didn't actually get to do his course, but I got to do his... I did the course not under him, but under someone who'd done it under him. And then we started running his program in our home. And we were taking people in, and that was back in 1987, 1988, 1989. Now in 1990, we were ready to go. We were looking for a property where we could start up a proper health retreat. And so that's another story, how we found the property. But Greg here actually played a major role in it because he knew we were looking for a property. And one night, I had a couple of other families come round and we were praying together for a property. We were looking for a property and we were praying, and we actually had a list of the things we were looking for. We wanted it in southeast Queensland. It had to have plenty of water. It also, we preferred somewhere in the country, but not too far from the towns. Somewhere that had 6 or 7 buildings, and somewhere that had existing fruit orchards. So this was the plan. If we could find something like that, we would buy it. And just after we finished saying our prayer, the phone rang, and it was actually Greg. And he said to me, are you still looking for a property? And I said, yeah, we're just having a meeting about it right now. And he said, well, I know a property at Kin that's got 6 or 7 buildings on it. And I said, well, that's exactly what we got written down, 6 or 7 buildings. So we went up there and it had everything that we had on the list. And that's the property where we are in Kin today. Now, we've been there for 14 years, and during that 14 years, we've had quite a few thousand people come through there. And we keep improving our program, but the program's basically designed so that we can get people in, we can study them and find out what's wrong with them. We look into their medical history, their dental history, their lifestyle history, and we want to really know everything about them, including their emotional history. Whatever they want to tell us, so that we can use that information to work out how to get them well. And then we might refer them to people who can deal with dental or spinal problems or blood chemistries. We've got good contacts with the local doctors so that we can get pathology done. But we investigate the people, and our expertise is in that investigation. Now from there, we start to treat the people. And it usually, with most people, it's a cleanse where we clean out the poisons out of their body, and then we teach them proper nutrition and build their bodies properly up and send them home with a program that is designed for them on how they can get well and stay well. And it's been working, because in the last 14 years, most people that come there now are people who are being sent by people who've been. So we don't really do a lot of advertising. This year, most of this year, we've been full, and we really need to expand it. And I think it's a really important, so it's something that the world needs a lot of today. And the reason why I like to get out and share with communities, and I do get around a fair bit because I get invited by people that have been to Living Valley Springs and have had an experience there, like a healing experience has happened to them, and then they've gone back to their hometown. It may be Launceston in Tasmania or Cairns or somewhere else, and they get excited with their community, and then they will rustle around their community and they'll get me to come down and present a series of lectures to their community. So I do get around a fair bit doing that. But I believe that the world really needs a health revolution, and I think that it needs to start now. Do you believe that? And that's what we'll be looking at tonight. So I'll move on through here. The first lecture tonight, we called it on the program, What's Causing All the Cancer? And you'll see why we called it that, because by the time we get to the end of tonight, you'll have a fair idea. Lecture 1 here, I've got health, wealth and wisdom and the secret of longevity. Now, I think we all want health, wealth and wisdom. But there's no point in having wellness if we don't get longevity too. Sorry, it's the other way around. No point in having longevity if we don't get wellness. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to get old and be sick. My wife had an auntie who was, she was about 91 when she died, but from about 80 on, she was just asking to die. She just wanted to die. She had hip replacements, knee replacements, cataracts in her eyes done. Her body was falling to pieces, but she had such a strong heart and such a powerful constitution that she just wouldn't die. But she was in pain, she was suffering, and she just wished she could die. But she still kept eating her scones, white bread, and the jams and the cups of tea with lots of sugar in it, and so on, right up until the end. And it was those things really that had caused the condition in her body, the arthritis and the eye problems and so on. So tonight's lecture, in fact this whole week, really the plan is that you people will learn how to achieve health, wealth and wisdom and have wellness and longevity, so that you can be a lot stronger in your lives and a lot more powerful in the work you do, a lot more energy, and have a big impact on the people around you. Now, a little bit about Living Valley Springs. Living Valley Springs is, it's at 147 acres. It's actually 160 acres now because we bought the place next door. But it's got 30 people work there, and they're all very, very busy. We take in around 21 people, maybe 22, every second Sunday for 10 days. And those groups come in. Each group comes in at the same time, and they form their own group dynamics. Most of them don't know each other. They meet for the first time on arrival, and it's amazing how a group of 20 people can form its own personality. But they do, and so we have a lot of fun there. You always have one funny person, you have one very caring person, you have someone else who's a bit different some other way, and so you get a blend of people. It just seems to always happen. And the therapists are flat out working with these people, treating their ailments and teaching them how to cook, teaching them how to exercise, dealing with their emotional problems. We've got emotional counselling department there as well. Basically, at the end of 10 days, it's hoped that they will go home and they'll never turn back to the old way of life. And people come there with all sorts of things, from arthritis, diabetes, asthma, obesity, people coming to give up tobacco. Sometimes we get people coming to give up hard things like heroin and so on. And we even get a lot of people with heart conditions and cancer. Over the 14 years, we've developed a good relationship with a lot of the medical doctors because we are dealing with cancer. Now, in this country, natural therapists that deal with cancer are frowned upon by the medical profession generally, because the medical profession has got a standard method for dealing with cancer which involves chemotherapy and radiation. We don't use that. In fact, we go the opposite way. We find if people have had chemotherapy, it sometimes, most times, is actually harder to get them well, because you've got to deal with the chemicals that are in the body as well as the problem. But we've found that a number of local doctors actually like us because we've been taking people in that they just don't have any answers for. And we've seen quite a few people's lives completely turn around. And we had a tremendous relationship with a doctor in Pomona, but he's become a skin specialist now, so he's left the area. And we've developed a relationship now with a doctor down at Noosaville named Peter Johnson. And I don't know if anyone knows him, but he's a very good doctor. And it's good to have that relationship because we can bounce things off him, we can get pathology done, and so on. Now, part one, the world does need a health revolution. And I'm hoping that when you go away from here that you'll play a big role in making that happen. Because if each person has an influence or an impact on just a few people around them, and then they have an impact on a few more people, well, then it will spread. That's what happens with revolutions. But something needs to happen, because if it doesn't, what's going to happen to the next generation and the one after that? Like, you look at all of the disease in children today, like that never existed when we were young, when I was young. And you look at all the cancer. How many people here know someone who's actually got cancer at the moment? Yeah, well, see, most people. Most people. I've spoken to groups of 400. I've said, how many people know someone close who's got cancer? And nearly every hand goes up. Because cancer is now affecting, like, well, it's 33% of deaths now are due to cancer. And a recent survey in America, which included skin cancers, found that 91% of the population had cancer. Now, that's including skin cancer, and benign cancers and small tumours and things like that. But something's going wrong out there. And heart disease today is killing, well, it's 51% of deaths, heart disease. Now, in 1920, heart disease was less than 10% in the Western world. And it's interesting to note that in 1920, margarine was only just starting to come on the market. And the consumption of butter in 1920 was, in America, was 18 pounds per person per year. By 1960, the butter consumption had plummeted from 18 pounds per person per year down to 4 pounds per person per year. But the consumption of margarine had gone from just about zero up to a huge figure. I'm not sure what the figure was, I can't remember, but it was way over the 18 pounds per person per year, because it's in everything. It's in bread, it's in biscuits, it's in cakes. And the heart disease in America went up in proportion to the consumption of butter going down and margarine going up. So that tells you something, doesn't it? Because we're now putting so many chemicals and man-made foods on the market, and we're getting into genetics and genetic engineering, and we're really playing around with the creation, and it's a very dangerous thing to do. So we need to stand up and say something about it. The society is degenerating. As much as we think, well, a lot of scientists say we're evolving, in actual fact we're degenerating. And we're degenerating physically, mentally, morally and spiritually as a race of people. Would anyone disagree with that? No. But if you do, I can give you a bit more evidence. But I think you see it on the television, on the news. Okay. Now, children's health today is a big problem. Autism is a huge problem. And now it's being linked to vaccinations. There's a lot of studies out now linking autism, not to the vaccine, but to the preservatives that have been used in the vaccines. One of those preservatives is called thimerosal, which is actually made from mercury. It is mercury. And mercury is a very powerful disinfectant, antibiotic, and so they put it into some of the injectables so that it preserves them. But they're finding now that this may be one of the main reasons for such a big increase in autism. We're seeing ADD and ADHD, and we're seeing children being born with tumours and cancers, and we're seeing the... is that making a noise? Is there a problem with the camera? Yeah, we're seeing a problem. We're seeing the big children's hospitals, like Camperdown Children's Hospital down in Sydney, full all the time. Another disease that we're seeing happening with children a lot is spina bifida. And that's just due to bad diet, mostly on the part of the mother or the father, but mostly the mother. Usually not eating enough greens and maybe drinking a lot of coffee. These things produce a folic acid deficiency before conception, and that creates a problem of spina bifida. My father was telling me about a friend of his recently that had they had a baby, and the baby was born with a terminal bone disease. Was given 8 months to live. And my father said, you know, how could this happen? Like, the baby hasn't even had a chance to disobey the laws of health. And I said, well, it's got to be the parents. So he went back and asked the parents and found out that they both had busy jobs. They ate mostly out, junk food, fast food. They drank a lot of coffee, they ate a lot of sugar, they didn't drink water, and they never exercised. And then they wondered why their baby was born with a terminal bone disease. And we see children being born today everywhere with serious health problems. And we wonder why. It comes back to the parents and the grandparents. And sometimes even going back another generation, because we're seeing that the race is degenerating. So children's health is a big issue that we really need to look at and do something about. And you know something? I've had a lot of school teachers have come to Living Valley Springs to de-stress in their school holidays. And they hear this information and they say, we've got to get this information into the schools in Queensland. Right? I say, yeah, good. So they've gone back to the school and they've said, look, we'd like to get some health lectures here for the kids on lifestyle, just basic lifestyle, about what Coke does to the body and why sugar's so bad, and refined foods and eating between meals and overeating and all the junk food, the soft drinks and all that. So the kids have got a bit of information on this. And they've said, we can get this guy from Living Valley Springs to come and do some lectures. And the school said, yeah, fantastic, but we have to get permission off the education department. It's always been knocked back. There's been quite a few requests have been put in, they've all been knocked back. Even the school at Kin, the principal asked me if I would come and run a series of lectures for the kids, because in the little country town of Kin, children were getting sick. Asthma in this state, do you know 29% of the children in Queensland use puffers? It's just unbelievable. So he was having this problem in Kin. He asked me to come and lecture, but he said, I better get permission off the education department. They knocked it back. Why? Because they don't want the parents getting upset. Because the kids are going to come home and say, Dad, don't drink that Coke. You know, who told you that? You know, so it's a problem. It's sad, but we need to do something. You might come up with some ideas. Nursing homes today are a big problem, aren't they? When I was young, there weren't too many of them. Today, they're a lucrative business. They're everywhere, and we're seeing old people end up in nursing homes, and they're put on drugs to make them easy to manage, and it's a miserable existence until they die. How many people have visited a nursing home recently? Yeah, well, you know what I'm saying. Some of them are okay, but most of them, it's a miserable existence. And they feed them on junk a lot of the time. I knew a friend who was an electrician in a nursing home, and I was visiting him there one day, and he took me into the pantry and showed me the food that they feed to the people there. And it was all canned and sugared food and so on. So that's another sad thing. And so we need to look after the older people. We need to have an education program so that people don't end up in nursing homes. Like Pat, who's sitting over here, if you don't mind me mentioning you, Pat, she turns 80 in a few months, and she's still working full time. Well, she's trying to retire at the moment, but I won't let her. Why is she so strong and healthy? Because all her life she has diligently tried to follow the basic laws of life, the laws of health that we're going to talk about tonight. And so she's reaping the reward that she's strong and healthy. She's nearly 80, that's what we should all be aiming to do. And it starts when we're young. You know, a lot of teenagers think that they're invincible, that they can do what they want, but it always has a harvest later on. It always catches up. Now, hospitals, another big problem. You know, I remember when I was about 8 years old, I got into a bit of a fight at school. And, you know, I remember my opponent gave me a good right hook in the appendix. And the next morning, I was raced to hospital to get the appendix out. It was in a hospital in Sydney. It was the policy of that hospital that every patient every day was wheeled out into a big courtyard to get their daily dose of sunlight and fresh air. And so I recovered very quickly. And other people did too. It was a nice social. You're out there with all these other patients on your bed. They wheel the beds out there. But today that doesn't happen anymore. Today they're air conditioned and you're on hospital food, and they're not what they used to be. And they're really just depositories for drugs, really. I mean, we can't do without hospitals, particularly the emergency place, and if I had an accident or something, that's where I'd want to go. But I think we really need to avoid, as much as we can, going to hospital. A lot of mistakes are made in hospitals, particularly in America. I mean, you've probably read a lot about them. Last year, some man went in to have a leg amputated, and they took off the wrong one. And a lot of mistakes happen. So it's good to keep out of hospitals. So the only way we're going to make sure we do keep out of hospitals, really, apart from accidents, is to look after ourselves. Now, chemicals is a big problem. When we talk about what's causing all the cancer today, chemicals is one of the things. There's a number of them, but chemicals is one of them. Did you know that there's 300,000 new chemicals on this planet that did not exist pre-1900? So in 104 years, we've invented 300,000 new chemicals. The Americans don't know what to do with their chemical, what do you call it? Waste. The chemical waste, because they've got big areas now, like big lakes, where chemicals are being dumped, and nothing grows for miles and miles around them. You know, I've got a documentary on this back at the retreat. So chemicals are a big problem, and the sad thing is that every one of us is contaminated by chemicals. It's in the food we eat because it's been grown in soil that's been fertilised with artificial chemicals and used poisonous insecticides and so on. It's in the air that we're breathing. It's in the clothes. It's in the buildings. It's in everything. I mean, even tobacco today, like people smoking. Do you know, people were smoking like back in the early 1900s, and even back before that, cigarettes actually came from the Americas. The Spanish took it on. I've just been over in Spain, and just about everybody smokes. I couldn't work out why everybody smokes, but it's because they brought tobacco from the Americas, and it was their main, it's what built their whole economy, was tobacco. But people didn't get the same diseases from tobacco that they do today. Do you know why that is? It's because the chemicals today they're using in growing tobacco. There's a huge number of very poisonous chemicals in the growing and the processing of tobacco. And so that's why we're seeing a lot more lung cancer and a lot more serious diseases from tobacco today. I mean, obviously all tobacco is bad, but it's much, much worse in recent times because of the chemicals. Now, farming methods today are another big problem because the soil is being used over and over again, and even the soil around here where ginger grows, you see them plough it up every year and replant the ginger year after year after year. They never give the soil a rest, and they have to put a lot of chemicals back into the soil so that they can grow that ginger. So the ginger's growing not from the nutrients in the soil, they were gone years ago. It's growing from the chemicals that are being put into the soil. The soil is just the modem for the chemicals to grow the ginger. And you find that the amount of chemicals that is being used in the farming today, it's just unbelievable. Is anyone here into farming, agriculture, in a big way? No. Fast food is another big problem. Today, everybody's busy, so you know, it's McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and all these fast pizzas and refined, processed, fried foods. And it's causing severe free radical damage in our bodies, and it's breaking us down and ageing us. And it's also causing cancer. Now, it's interesting with cultural societies. I actually tried to get a Vanuatuan here, but I couldn't find a picture of one. That's an African. But the same thing in Africa. In Vanuatu, Pat and I went over to Vanuatu about 4 or 5 years ago to run a series of lectures. And it was to about 35 or 40 nationals who wanted to learn how to take a health message to the islands in Vanuatu. And we found that the lifespan of the Vanuatu nationals pre-Second World War was about 85. Now it's around 58. Right, so it's dropped dramatically, nearly 30 years since the Second World War. So I was trying to find out why this is. So I started asking a lot of nationals what they eat. And it's morning for breakfast it was Cocoa Pops, cornflakes, this sort of thing, milk and sugar. They'd have morning tea, even lamingtons and pastries and things like that. And then for lunch it would be meat pies, like typical Western food. Chocolate, they eat a lot of chocolate. Now, I mean, there are some markets down at the water where a lot of them come down and buy their coconuts and their pawpaws and all that. But a lot of nationals there have gone on to the junk food. And when did that happen? Well, it was during the Second World War, because the Americans had a big Air Force base there. And they brought their fast food. They brought their fast food to Vanuatu, and the natives thought, well, these powerful Americans, if this is what they eat, it must be good. And so they took it all on, but they couldn't deal with it, and so their lifespan has dropped dramatically. So I just told them, I said, you need to get back to your ancestral diet. I said, you need to go back and eat what your grandparents ate. And one man put up his hand, he said, well, that could be a problem because my grandparents used to eat people. Well, it was true. Yeah, statistics, I mentioned heart disease being around 51%, cancer's over 30%, asthma, 29% of children in this state use a puffer at some stage. Diabetes is on the increase dramatically. And so you'll see, if you've been to a doctor lately, they've usually got posters up saying, get checked for diabetes. Especially if you're overweight and over 50, you're a prime candidate for diabetes. We're going to see a complete explosion of diabetes in the next 10 years. You'll see, and the drugs that they're giving them for it, it does not cure it. They're not looking at curing it. And as one doctor who's a good friend said to me, he said, you know, the people that go to Living Valley Springs, they're prepared to pay money to learn how to do it properly. And he said they probably will. But he said, I just deal with the average person who doesn't want to make any changes. They get diabetes, they don't want to stop drinking their Coke, they don't want to give up their sugar and their tobacco, they don't want to start exercising or doing all these other things that you teach. He said, so that's why we're in business. That's what he said to me. He said, that's why doctors are in business, because they're dealing with the average person who wants the quick fix. Now, we don't want to be like that, do we? Because there isn't really any quick fix. All doctors do generally, and most doctors I know totally agree with this, so I'm not actually speaking against doctors. I get on well with doctors, but they've been taught at university how to get you back to the comfort zone as quick as possible. In other words, suppress the symptoms. Take away your symptoms as quick as possible without a lot of thought for the long term. You see, so we have people come to Living Valley Springs are taking a drug to counteract the side effects of another drug that they're taking, which was to counteract the side effects of another one, which was to counteract the side effects of one they were taking because a lady was getting dysmenorrhea or something like that. I've had a number of patients that have been taking 4 drugs, but one was for the condition and the others were for all the side effects. Yeah, I mean, this happens. Gallbladder disease is another big one, and obesity is a big problem in Australia and America, and prostate disease, and there's a lot of other ones that are on the increase dramatically. 40% of all Australian men over 50 have got prostate inflammation. Prostate cancer is now the #1 cancer killer amongst men in this country. It's even more prevalent than breast cancer is in women. And there's very little, the medical profession hasn't put the same attention into prostate cancer as it's put into breast cancer. Maybe that's a good thing, because maybe men need to learn it's a lifestyle condition. It's because of what they eat, the way they live, and so on, rather than just something you just get. Now, the problem is that today, we've created a situation which is very hard to reverse. Now, a story that I heard once was about a town where there was a big cliff right near the edge of the town, and people used to fall off that cliff quite regularly. Cyclists went over and walkers used to fall off, and the townspeople got together and they decided that they needed to do something about this. So they raised some money, a lot of money, and they built a big ambulance station at the bottom of the cliff. Right, that was their first solution. And they thought, well, if people fall off, at least we can get them in the ambulance, get them off to hospital, we might save a life. And then a wise man came along and he said, wouldn't it be a much better thing just to build a fence at the top of the cliff? So they built a fence at the top of the cliff, and that was the end of anyone falling off. Now, what we have done in our society, and I'm not blaming doctors, it's our fault. It's what we wanted as a people, because we wanted the quick fix. As a race of people, we have created a medical system that is costing us billions and billions of dollars, and it's the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. That's what it is. It's there for when we get sick. But how much work is being put into preventative? You know, how much time and effort? Now, when I was in Vanuatu, I had a meeting in the local council with the assistant mayor of Port Vila, and he said that their hospital's full all the time. They've just bought 3 more parcels of land to build 3 medical centres that'll be halfway houses into the hospital, so that they can try and cope with the disease problem in Vanuatu. And I said, well, why don't you build a health education centre and start teaching people the way to live? And he said, that's a really good idea. They hadn't thought of it. So they decided, well, then they asked if we could get involved with it, but we haven't had the time really to get involved in it. But that's what they're planning on doing, is actually starting to get preventative medicine, education, educating the people rather than just being there for when the people get sick. Prevention's certainly better than cure, isn't it? And allopathic medicine is the modern medicine that we have today. Basically, it's designed around scripts. You know, doctors will say, look, come to me and I'll give you a script. How long do you spend in a doctor's surgery if you've got a flu or something? 5 minutes, right? And you'll get given a script. But that drug is not going to cure your problem. It's going to suppress it. Now, if you went to a hygienic doctor, and that was the name given to doctors back in the 1800s who did not use drugs. Hygienic medicine, they'll give you a much longer consultation. They'll interrogate you because they want to know everything about you. How much water are you drinking? How much exercise do you do? What are you eating? How many times a day do you eat? How much sunlight do you get? What about your breathing? Are you under stress? Have you got any emotional problems? And so on. So they're going to interrogate you so that they can find out what's causing the problem. And then they're going to prescribe lifestyle changes and cleansing. They may not prescribe any herbs or any tablets or anything. They might just give you a prescription to drink a lot more water. Now, for example, someone who's got a runny nose and they go along to a doctor, he'll either give them Sudafed or an antihistamine or an antibiotic. But if they went along to a natural doctor, he's going to interrogate them because he'll say, runny noses usually happen because of congestion in the body. How are your bowel movements? Are you constipated? Are you going to the toilet? Are you getting good evacuations every day? How much water are you drinking? What about your exercise program? Are you eating refined, processed foods? How much raw food are you eating? How much salads and fruits? And so on. And when he gets all the yeses in the nose, he can work out what the problem is, and then he'll write out a script and it'll tell you to drink more water, to stop eating between meals, to stop eating the junk food and so on, and he'll give you that and you'll go away and say, hey, hang on, I came in here with a problem and he hasn't given me anything to take. Because we're conditioned today that when we go to a medical person, we want to put our hand out and get something to take. And if we don't get something to take, we're going to be a little bit put out. Because I get people come to me all the time that get upset if I don't give them something to take. They say, okay, I'll do all those things, but what can I take? Well, don't take anything, just go and drink water. But can't I take something to stop the runny nose? Drink water. You know, but just people can't get it. It's because of our conditioning. Now, there's a little book I've got here. We've got about 10 of these out there, and I think we do have some more of them back at Living Valley Springs, which we can bring tomorrow night. but it's called Health and Happiness. It was written in the year 1905. The lady who wrote this book was quite famous during the 1800s, one of the leading health lecturers in the world. And she wrote more books than any other female author in the history of the world, even to this day. She wrote a lot about health. She wrote about herbs, about agriculture, growing fruit trees, how to do it properly. She also wrote about history, and she wrote about raising children and family and a number of other subjects. Quite an interesting person. But in 1905, she wrote this book because there was a trend toward drug medication. Allopathic medicine was starting to win over hygienic medicine. And so she produced this book, which is based on the laws of health. And in this book, she says the only hope of better things is in the education of the people in right principles. And that's what we're really trying to do at Living Valley Springs. And that's what I hope, that you join the revolution and you educate the people you know. It's a lot better to educate than to medicate. Would you agree with that? So she also says in this book that let physicians teach the people that restorative power is not found in drugs but in nature. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. Right? In other words, even cancer is an effort of nature to deal with another problem. You see, when someone gets a tumour, quite often it's simply the body's, it's got enough toxin in it, it can't get rid of it for some reason. Maybe the liver's not filtering properly, maybe the colon is not evacuating properly, maybe the person's not drinking enough water, the kidneys aren't working properly, and the body cannot eliminate poisons quick enough. So the body ends up creating another filter system. And some cancers are this, where they over in the University of California, they got a big cancer, a big tumour, which is full of capillaries, and they actually ran toxic blood through it, and it comes out fairly clean the other side. So cancer can be an effort to try and filter out filth out of your body, but it gets out of control. It gets out of control because once we start mutating a cell and it starts multiplying, bang, it's very hard to stop it. But she goes on to say that in the case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. That's the very first thing. Not the cure, but the cause. The first thing we need to find out is why we got sick. And we need to go back to the laws of health and work out which ones we've been violating and then bring them back into line. The cause should be ascertained. Unhealthful conditions need to be changed. Wrong habits need to be corrected. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and to re-establish right conditions in the system. Right? And so when we have any sickness, we need to go back and look at ourselves and look at our exercise program, look at how much water we're drinking, how much we're eating, and all the other things we're doing in our lives, which we'll talk about later on tonight, and work out where we're making mistakes and use those to get us well, rather than trying to take things all the time. You know, even with herbs and things. I mean, we're going to talk about nutrition later on in this program during the week, where there is a big problem today with nutrients. We're not getting the nutrients that we should be getting. In fact, a study done by the University of New Jersey in 1942, they do it every year. They get foods from all over America and they work out the nutrient value in all the foods across the board. And 2002 compared to 1942 was that the nutrient value right across the board had dropped by 62%. So the nutrient value in the foods we're eating today is 62% less than what our parents were eating in 1942. That's pretty sad. But so that means that there is a need often to supplement with superfoods and things like bee pollen and green barley grass and maybe some vitamins and minerals that are as natural as possible. But we need to look at the basics first. Now, sovereignty is an interesting subject because I think sovereignty is a gift from God, and every one of you people and me, we're all sovereigns. In other words, we've been given the right to manage our own lives. We can manage our own little kingdoms, we can have our own house, we can run our own business, we can go where we want, we can travel, we're free. That's a God-given gift. But sovereignty in the area of health is being eroded away rapidly because today we're being educated that if we're sick, we go to a doctor and we give him permission to poison us, to cut us, to whatever. You know what I'm saying? So we're giving out the sovereignty of our own lives away to a medical profession that is trained to suppress the symptoms to bring you back to the comfort zone, right? But we need to be responsible and to learn about the body and to change our lifestyle and to learn natural remedies and to learn about diseases. In fact, children should be taught these things from a very young age. You know, like, it's interesting that Seventh-day Adventist children back in the 1800s, from what I can read, used to know every muscle and system in the body by the time they were 12 years of age. It was part of their education program. They knew about disease. They also understood about herbs and agriculture. It was part of the education program, but not so much today. But it's something that we need to have in our revolution to get children educated about the body. So we've had 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids have come to Living Valley Springs with sicknesses. Their parents have brought them along or sent them along. And some of these kids are totally not interested. You know, like, they don't want to come to the lectures. They're not interested in making any changes. They're there because they've been forced to be there by their parents. But just about every time we've managed to get them to sit in on a couple of the talks, and bang, it's hit home. And we've had some of these kids have come and said, man, I will never drink Coke again. I didn't realise it was so bad. You know, and they've gone home different. See, it's hard for the parents. The parents tell them and tell them and tell them, and they just don't do it. But when they hear it from somewhere else, oftentimes they make the changes. Now, disease comes in a number of forms. First of all, we have diseases of the chemistry of the body. When I've got chemical written there, I'm not talking about the chemicals I was talking about before. I'm talking about the body chemistry can be diseased. We can have disease through the mechanical system of the body, through the emotions, or the spiritual part of man. Any of these areas can create a problem which can create death. And we don't want to be band-aiding them all. We need to learn how to fix them once and for all. Now, chemical problems, the problems in the chemistry of our body would include toxicity because of the chemicals and the poisons that are coming into us through our food and the atmosphere and so on. Nutritional deficiency because of the nutrients that are missing in our food today, and microorganisms that are out there like parasites and fungus and things like that. Now, microorganisms include bacteria, viruses, parasites and fungus. Now, this is a really important part of the program, and this is something that I really want to bring home tonight, is that bacteria and viruses and parasites and fungi are just simply scavengers that are found in unhealthy, toxic or malnourished tissue. Now, to explain what I'm saying, if you had a dump right outside your house, right outside your kitchen, and every day you throw all your scraps out there, and you do this for several months, it's going to become a stinking, messy place, right? And the flies will come in, and the rats, and the birds will come in. And so every time you're on the telephone, you can't hear what the other person's saying because the birds are making so much noise out there in your rubbish heap. So you decide to do something about it. So you go and get your shotgun and you shoot all the birds and you poison the rats, right? I guarantee in a few weeks there'll be more birds and more rats and more flies, right? And so you keep going out there and shooting them and poisoning them. You're not going to get rid of the problem. The only way to deal with the problem is you've got to get the bulldozer in there and get rid of the rubbish, get rid of it altogether. Now, the problem today is that we get a virus and we think, oh, I've caught this virus. The problem is that our body chemistry is such that we've now become an environment where a virus can live and flourish. And viruses can actually be vacuum cleaners because viruses tend to clean out the tissue of the body. A lot of that mucus that comes out when you've got the flu, it's filth coming out of the body. Some viruses cause a fever to cause you to sweat. Some viruses cause you to get diarrhea. But most viruses create an elimination of poison. So viruses are actually a friend. A virus is telling you that the condition of your body is toxic and it's probably acid and it needs a clean. And if we go and shoot it with antibiotics or poison it, we're actually not going to let it do the job it's trying to do. We're going to leave the poison in there and add more to it. And Bacteria, all these sort of things. We get a bacterial infection. We think we need an antibiotic. We don't. We need to clean the terrain of our bodies. If you can maintain a clean terrain, you won't get sick. It is hard today because of the conditions we're living under. Low oxygen in our atmosphere. It used to be over 30% a few hundred years ago, but now it's down to about 21%. So we've got low oxygen, we've got chemicals, we've got lack of nutrients in our food. So we need to learn how to maximise our nutrition and minimise our exposure to poisons. And we need to be aware of that every day of our lives if we want to keep healthy and want to have wellness and longevity, because otherwise things will catch up with us. These scavengers, another illustration I'll give you is if you had a cow out in the field, a good healthy cow, and it's got no worms, it's got no parasites, but you go and put a bullet in its head. I guarantee in about 3 days, the cow's body will be full of bacteria. Why? Because that's nature's way to break down unhealthy, toxic, dead tissue. You know what I'm saying? So if we get a bacterial infection, what's it telling us? There's a problem with our chemistry. We need to change the way we're living. So we need to maintain a clean terrain. Chemical diseases would include diseases of the spine, spinal malalignment and so on, muscular problems, structural problems, and even dental problems. And we will be going into these further in the program this week. We've got emotional problems like stress, the way we think, the way we deal with other people, and the way we deal with situations and crises, and the way we deal with ourselves. These all have a big impact on our body chemistry. And if we're not dealing with these areas the way we should, then we will get sick. And we get many people come to Living Valley Springs who are sick simply because of grief, anxiety, remorse, guilt, distrust, and a lot of negative emotions. And quite often we've got a whole counselling section there now because it doesn't matter what we do for them. We can clean the filth out of their body, we can put them on all the right nutrients, but if we can't deal with that emotional problem, they won't get well. But we've had the blessing of seeing a number of cancer patients who we've been able to hone in and find that emotional problem and deal with it and get them to deal with it, and then together with all the physical changes we've made, we've seen total recoveries. But we never would have seen them if the emotional side wasn't dealt with properly. Spiritual health is another important thing, where we're looking at areas like guilt and the heavy burdens that people place upon themselves sometimes. You know, we see people that are just not free in the spirit. And some people feel that they have to be constantly cutting themselves, so to speak, you know what I'm saying, in life, that they feel that that's the right way to live. And as a result, they end up getting sick because they just can't live according to the standards that they place upon themselves. Right? And we see other people that have done something years ago and they've never forgiven themselves, and they get sick. So these are areas we will be dealing with. I think it's on Wednesday night. Wednesday night we've got the whole night just on this subject. So there's a little extract from that book that I had on there before. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. I'd like you all to memorise that one, if you can try and remember that, because that's really the proper understanding of disease. In 1986, the author of this book was made National Health Federation President in America. The National Health Federation of America made her their posthumous president. She'd been dead for 71 years. But they gave her that position because of this statement. And they adopted this definition of disease as the official definition of disease for the National Health Federation of America. So it's a good one to memorise. And when you start to understand that, you get sick and you think, now hang on, I haven't just caught something. What am I doing wrong? I'm going to have to look at my life, make some changes. Now the health model. The health model we work to at Living Valley Springs is based on 8 laws of health. And this is them up on the board. We call it lifestyle. And we're talking about the air we breathe and how we breathe. We're talking about sunlight. Abstemiousness is an old English word that means to abstain from any harmful substance and to be temperate in the good things. Rest Very, very important as a law of health. Exercise, proper diet, the use of water, and trust in divine power. And these are also 8 doctors. If you get sick, these are the 8 doctors that you need to go to and apply them to your own life. And if we do that properly, it will produce wellness and longevity, because these are the secrets of living a long life and being well. Now, looking at pure air. Pure air, today we've got a problem. There's not too much pure air around, especially if you live in a city or in a town. So we need to maximise our exposure to pure air. We should keep our windows open in our houses as much as we can. We should air out our mattresses every 3 months or so. And we should make a real effort to make sure we're aware of the need to breathe. Further on tonight, I'll be talking about how to breathe, because that's important too. A lot of people breathe shallow and they end up getting sick. There's problems like sleep apnea and asthma and other diseases that are related to our breathing habits. We'll go into that later on tonight. Sunlight, a very important fact in health. Do you know, today in Queensland, people are afraid of the sun because there's been so much negative advertising about it. So skin cancer and all that. So people are covering up with lots of blockout and caps and long sleeve shirts and all that. We do need sunlight. What causes the problem is too much sun and maybe too much sun at the wrong time of the day. And coupled with a bad diet and too much sun, that's what creates skin cancers. So sun can cause damage to the skin, so we do need to be careful. But you need at least 20 minutes every day of sunlight on the equivalent to the surface area of both arms to get the daily requirement of vitamin D. Vitamin D is incredibly important. You know, we find with MS patients, and we'll talk about MS because we've been dealing with MS successfully for about 11 years now. And we get a lot of MS patients even coming from overseas now to Living Valley Springs. We had a man recently came from South Africa to Living Valley Springs for 24 days because of his MS, and we've had a recent email that he's now walking properly, and we'll talk about that further in the program. But with MS, we find they're always vitamin D deficient, and you'll find that MS does not exist usually in the tropical areas. It's only in the colder parts of the world. And they're people that don't usually get a lot of exposure to the sun. There's other reasons why they get MS, which we'll go into later. But sunlight plays a major role in the healing process. So you need to make sure you're getting some of it every day on the skin when you won't burn. And if you've got fair skin, make sure you do it early in the day when you won't burn. But 9 o'clock or even earlier. I mean, if you have to go to work and work indoors, get out in the lunchtime and get somewhere private where you can undo your shirt maybe, or pull your sleeves right up and get some sun on the skin of your body. It's really, really important. We'll talk more about that later on. We're running out of time for this particular tape, but abstemiousness means to abstain from harmful substances, to be temperate in the good things. It includes eating between meals, which we were never meant to do, overeating, and it's referring to a balanced diet. When we come back after the break, I'll go into that one a little bit more. I think I might stop now, and we'll continue on from here at the end of the break. So we'll have a little break for 15 minutes. We've got a few things outside there that my daughter Amber has got, and Michaela, what we call superfoods, and there's some books and things that might be helpful to you in your quest for wellness and longevity. So go and have a look at them, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.